have filmed this video too many times to count. Hi guys, I'm Amy. Welcome back to my channel, and I have a reading wrap up for all of you, so let's go ahead and get into it. The first book that I'm going to chat about is Catapult by Emily Friedman. This is her short story collection. She is also the author of The History of Wolves, which was shortlisted for the Man Booker last year. I have not read that book, and this was my first experience with her writing, and I absolutely loved it. You guys know I love short story collections, and Emily is very, very successful at them. She can spin a hell of a narrative within a very short amount of time, and I just felt like I really knew these characters. It's been a while now since I've read this book, but I don't necessarily remember the little details, but I remember just feeling connected, and like her writing just really, really spoke to me as a person, and that my reading soul was just like, yes, I'm here for all of this. She writes about a variety of different characters from different backgrounds and sexes and with different experiences, and I enjoyed all of them. She just seemed like a very well-rounded author, and it seemed like a very well-rounded collection, and it was sex positive, and it talked about human nature and relationships and all of those hard-hitting topics that you guys know that I love. The cover is 100% what drew me into this book, but the inside was just as good. So if you're looking for a short story collection that is hard-hitting and sometimes a little bit eccentric, but in all the right ways, you definitely need to check this one out. The next book that I have to share with you guys was a DNF for me, unfortunately, and this was an ARC that I received from NetGalley, and that is Your Creative Career by Anna Sabino. This book is basically supposed to be a guide for someone who's interested in having a non-traditional career, which is something that has always intrigued me. I don't know if it's necessarily what I want for myself, but this book sounded interesting because I do have creative pursuits that I would love to see turn into something more. But unfortunately, I had a really, really hard time getting past this condescending tone she had towards people who settle into a traditional job, career, lifestyle, and I had a really hard time swallowing that, so I was just decided to put it down because frankly, it wasn't for me. The third book that I read was an absolute roller coaster because on one hand I loved it, and on the other hand it was just too ridiculous to stomach, and that is Truth or Beard by Penny Reed. I originally heard about this book from Kate at The Novel Nomad. She has a wonderful channel. I highly recommend it. I'll leave it linked down below. But this is a contemporary romance about two people. Unfortunately, I don't remember their names because, again, it's been a little while since I've read it, and I didn't look it up because I'm just too lazy to do that, apparently. But the male protagonist is a twin, and he is a mechanic at their small town that they grew up in, and the female protagonist is now a teacher who is just staying in town long enough to save enough money so that she can go travel the world. And they've known each other basically their entire lives, and I'm always here for stories where relationships change and evolve and grow. And what I loved about this book were the characters in it. It was their relationship. It was how they grew to be who they became as a couple and individually. And I really enjoyed the sex positivity and just blatant open-faced desire that came from the female character. And I don't know if I don't experience this very often because I largely read historical romance when I do read romance, where these females are so reserved and in a lot of ways sheltered from the, shall we say, bedroom, maybe? Is that the proper term? It's probably not. So I enjoyed that part of this book, but the part that I didn't enjoy was the insane side plot lines that happen while this relationship is going on. They live in a small town, so everybody knows everybody, but there's this big, bad, evil biker gang, and there's been all these scandals in the past, because this book is the first book in a series called The Winston Brothers that was a spin-off from a different romance series by the same author, and I just found them really ridiculous. There's an estranged aunt that has to do with the female protagonist, and it was just a very different ride when you get away from the characters themselves. I will totally continue with this series because I had a lot of fun, and if you're looking for a book that's just like an escape, it's crazy, it's a little bit weird but fun with some really awesome characters, I say check this one out because, I mean, shit goes down, excuse my French, in this book, which you would not anticipate. The next book that I read was a bit of a booktube darling a few years back, and I can think of several booktubers still who will tell you that this is their favorite book of all time, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. And I can see why the hype is here. I really enjoyed my reading experience of this book, but I think for reasons that are probably different than everyone else's. I will say I had one really big disappointment concerning this book, and that is the fact that the two dueling magicians, or magician's apprentices, or however you want to refer to Celia and Marco, who are participating in this game that they, as the players, know very little about, fall in love, and that it sends off this different chain of events that wouldn't have otherwise occurred, and that is mentioned on the back of this book. That romance doesn't really even show any glimmer of happening until well into the second half of this book. So for me, I could have done without that knowledge because it felt more like a spoiler, because I was anticipating it while reading the first half and then some of this book. But I have to say, Erin Morgenstern can write. From the very first sentence, I was absolutely hooked while reading this. She created this night circus where this magical game is happening, that it's the setting for this, all these events. It's so real and visceral, and I can tell you how the Night Circus smells. I can tell you what it looks like. I can tell you what you feel like while you're there. And the Night Circus is its own character. To me, it's the best part of this book. I want the Night Circus to be real so desperately, and I haven't felt that way about another setting since reading books like Harry Potter or Tamora Pierce, and I was so thankful for that, because as an adult, I feel like a lot of literary fiction books, the setting is such a minimal part of it, whereas this, it's basically the entire book. And one aspect of Erin's writing that I really enjoyed is the fact that she doesn't tell you things. She lets you experience things. When Marco and Celia's relationship does start, you don't see every interaction between them. You get to fill in the blanks. You get to decide to some degree why these characters are who they are, or why they're becoming who they will be. And I absolutely love that. The cast of characters in this book is amazing. There was not one character that I felt was unimportant or a throwaway character. And she just spun an incredible narrative. This is a great story. I get why people love it. I get why people want this to be a movie or for it to have a sequel, but I really hope that it doesn't, because I think it's perfect just the way that it is. I did rate it 4 out of 5 stars because of a few things that just threw me off a little bit. Like I said, knowing about the romance, and for the most part, this book is a very slow pace, excuse me, but sorry, I just got interrupted and I'm not sure where I got cut off, but I'm just gonna tell you why I rated this 4 out of 5 stars instead of the full 5 out of 5. One, like I said, the fact that I knew about this romance that I think I would have done better not knowing about. And the second thing is that this book is very slow paced, which I was not anticipating, but really enjoyed. You guys know I love a book that is much more character driven and not this event after event after event. And there's a lot of buildup in this book. But at the end, when you do reach the climax, there's a major pace change, which threw me off a little bit. It's not terrible, but enough that I don't think I enjoyed it. The ending, as much as I could have, I liked the way it ended. It was a very literary ending, but the pace change was a little bit, I don't think disconcerting is the right word. That might be a bit strong, but I think you guys know what I'm doing. But regardless, the hype is real about this book. I know why people love it. I get why people love it. And I have a strong feeling I will read this book again because I want to go back to the Night Circus. The next book that I read is technically a middle grade graphic novel, but I would make a case that this is a young adult novel because the character in it is a 16-year-old girl in high school, and that is Pashmina by Nindi Chanani. And this is about a girl named Pri whose mother, while she was pregnant, emigrated from India to America and really doesn't talk much about India and her experiences in India and won't tell Pri about her father at all, essentially. Pri has been brought up with the Hindu faith and with different cultural aspects of India, but her mom won't talk about her own experiences there. And so that leaves Pri feeling very unsure about who she is as a person, because she is American, but she she's not Caucasian. She feels like she stands out. She feels like she doesn't fit in, and she's desperate to know more about India and to go to India, but her mother refuses to even think about that conversation. And one day when Pri is going through the closet, she finds a Pashmina that was her mother's, that when she puts it on, it transports her to India. She has an elephant and peacock tour guides, and so there's this magical realism about this book that I really, really liked that element of it, and I really did enjoy the art style. It's very simple and cartoon-esque, and when she's not wearing the Pashmina, it's in grayscale, but when she is wearing the Pashmina, it goes to full color, and I really liked the way that made you feel as a reader while you were experiencing these different parts about this story. But I felt like there were so many great conversations that could have happened in this book, and I felt largely like a lot of it was rushed. And I may be being a bit harsh because I know it's for middle grade readers, but I think they could have grasped more from it if she hadn't rushed the story quite so much. I absolutely intend to find out if Chinani has more works or more artwork out there, because I enjoyed her presentation so much and the plot itself, even though I did feel like it was rushed. But 2 to 3 5-star rating from me, I would say, but I do think it's worth picking up because it is short, it's a quick read, it's a graphic novel, and it brings up an interesting discussion that I'm really, really enjoying, this immigrant discussion and identity and what makes you who you are and where you belong. I just wish there was a little bit more from this, but again, worth giving it a shot if it sounds interesting to you. I have 2 more arcs from NetGalley to share with you guys. There will be a lot of these coming up because I went on a bit of a requesting binge on NetGalley thinking they'd be like, you're a nobody, why would I let you read a book ahead of time? And then I got a ton, and now I have the lowest feedback ratio rating ever on NetGalley, and we're trying to remedy that because I'm feeling some guilt. So the first of these 2 books is Zen and Gone by Emily France, and this is a YA book, and a lot of you know that I'm not a big YA reader. I do read some YA, but it is definitely not my go-to genre now, and this is a book about a 17-year-old girl named Essa who's living in Boulder, Colorado. She feels like the weight of the world is on her shoulders because her mother is largely checked out from being high and having too many boyfriends to count, and she feels like she needs to take care of her 9-year-old genius sister Puck. And the secondary character in this story is Oliver. He's from Chicago. He's been sent to stay with his aunt for the summer because his sister, who suffers from schizophrenia, had an incident, and Oliver's mom decided that he needed to take a break away from that stress and their family life. And Essa and Oliver's lives intersect, and this is about their journey as friends and getting to know each other. And this book could not have been more of a disappointment for me. Okay, you guys know the drill. My battery died. Things probably changed in the background. Moving on. Back to Zen and Gone. So the reason this book was such a huge disappointment for me is because there is this aspect about this book, and that is that Essa grounds herself in Zen Buddhism. And Buddhism is a topic that I find incredibly interesting. It's a philosophy that I find myself very drawn to. And I love that this was a YA book that discusses a faith in which the character is choosing to interact with it and doesn't feel stifled by it, or like they're being held back by their family traditions and ways. And that is the main reason why I picked this book up, especially with it being YA. But it was ridiculous. It was horribly written. The characters weren't fleshed out. Depending on whose point of view it was, Essa or Oliver's, Essa seemed like a completely different person. The ending of this book is so unrealistic and improbable. I couldn't even explain it to you if I wanted to spoil the book for you. I can suspend disbelief. I'm combining words now. I can suspend it, but this is just ridiculous. This never would have happened, and it was poorly written, and I can't even believe I finished it, to be honest with you guys. It was one of those books that I was hating it so much that that's why I finished it. it was a hate read, which is unfortunate, and maybe I just got this book at the wrong time, but if I've come across any book that I should tell you guys to pass up, it should be this one, because there's not an aspect of it that I found redeeming enough to get past the many, many problems that this book has. The last book that I have to share with you guys is Beauty in the Broken Places by Allison Pataki. This is a memoir about Allison's experience when her and her husband were on a plane. She's 4 months pregnant. Her husband is in medical school. He's almost finished up. She's published several books at this point. Their lives are looking great, and her husband suffers a very, very rare type of stroke that's basically unheard of in someone of his age, and it happens on the plane. So that's where you start this story and her reliving this experience of when her husband Dave suffered this stroke that almost rendered him back to a child in many ways, and it's about his recovery. So you then follow Allison and Dave and her having her baby while her husband's recovering and how the families interact, and you do get these glimpses into their past of as their relationship progressed and how they became a couple and when they got married and what their lives were looking like. But what I really enjoyed about this book is that Allison addresses the many things that she gets told and that you tell people when they are experiencing hardship. Everything happens for a reason. You don't get thrown anything that you can't handle, and how it feels to be on the other side of that tragedy, of that traumatic event, while those on the other side are thinking, I'm so thankful it didn't happen to me. And she addresses that, and I really enjoyed that discussion. Most of the time, I really enjoyed her writing. There were a few instances where I felt like some things got left unattended or the writing was a bit too simplistic, but overall I just found this book very, very raw, and it was really a way for her to cope with the fact that her life completely upended. It turned itself on its head in the worst possible way, and how her and Dave recovered and continue to recover. This book does end with a chapter written by Dave, which is so impressive, that the fact that a year later he was writing this letter, that he talks about Allison's strength and resilience throughout this entire experience, I guess you could say. And it's a good book. It's worth reading if you like memoirs, if you enjoy looking at relationships and how a person can handle such a horrible thing happening to them. I say it's worth picking it up. If you are looking for an outstanding, mind-blowing memoir, not for you, but it is a really beautiful book, and I think there are a lot of things that people can glean from the fact that she did experience something so terrible, her and her husband did, and her child coming into this world where there is so much stress. And that was it was a ride. It was an emotional ride. I never cried, but I did truly feel for Allison, and I can't imagine having my world upended like that. But I would say a 3 out of 5 star read. Alrighty guys, if you can't tell, I am way out of practice being behind a camera, but my husband and I are now finally settled in my parents' house while our house is being built, and hopefully I will be back to uploading videos a couple times a week. I've been out of practice for a few months now, and I kind of took a little bit of a hiatus at the end of last year, beginning of this year, and then with us selling our house. It's just been a bit chaotic, but hopefully things will be slowing down and I will get more comfortable behind a camera. The only way to do that is to sit behind a camera and feel very uncomfortable. But let me know what you guys have been reading, or if you've read any of these books that I've mentioned or want to read or have some questions. I have filmed this video too many times to count, so my descriptions and mini reviews of these books probably aren't the best. So if you have questions, please let me know. Or if you just want to say hi, I'd love to say hi back. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day, evening, afternoon, whatever you had ahead of you, and happy reading.